So, as Carrie indicated, this is going to be the first of our brown bag sessions, and today's topic is going to be how the contractor and government can input 1354 data. We've made some changes to RMS that allows for the contractor to enter in some of the information for 1354s. For those of you that are not familiar, for military construction contracts, real property is required to be documented by the use of the DD1354, otherwise known as a transfer and acceptance of military real property. This form is used to transfer facility or part of facility to the using service prior to either partial or complete occupancy. Real property is known as land, buildings, structures, utility systems, or any other improvements. This includes equipment attached to or made part of the buildings and structures, such as heating systems, but is not movable equipment, such as plant equipment, air conditioners, that sort of thing. So with the latest release of RMS, the contractors can now get into the closeout menu, and some changes have been made to allow them to do the real property input for the 1354. So from the Closeout tab, they now have the real property tab. Once they go into this tab, they can now edit. They can now add, edit any of the real property information that has been put in by them. So the contractor would just need to select add, and it comes up with the exact screen that the government users are used to seeing. They can input the real property unique identifier. Once they put that in, they can then select the category code. And just like in government mode, you have the option of selecting Army, Air Force, or Navy. And based on which using service is selected, the category codes will show up. We recommend that the CORs work closely with the contractors to make sure that codes are put in to avoid any issues later on with approval of the 354 by the real property officer. Once the contractor has entered in the category code, they can then go in and enter in the quantities for Unit 1 or Unit 2 if applicable. Once that has been entered, then they can enter in the total cost of construction for that facility. All of that is just the same as if a government user was putting in the real property. The big difference now is that once a contractor has completed, they must submit for acceptance. So they click a little checkbox that they're going to submit it, and it will come over to the government side to be approved. So any item that has not been accepted can be edited or deleted by the contractor. Once an item has been accepted, it can only be edited or deleted by the COR. I'm sorry, it can only be deleted by the COR. It can be edited by the contractor if the government sends it back. So once the contractor has submitted an item, the COR can then go into the real property item to enter in the type of construction, the sustainability code, and also enter in the information about the funding. There have been some changes to the drop-down menus for 1354s. The first one is type of construction. We now have either permanent, which is greater than 25 years, or semi-permanent, which is less than 25 years. The next one would be going to the sustainability code. These codes are listed there below. We suggest that you get with the using agency to make sure that you're using the correct sustainability code. Once that has been entered in, the next item to be entered is the funding source. There have been a lot of changes to the funding source with the new 1354. As you see, there's a drop-down menu for FY21 and FY22. Any contract that was awarded prior to FY22 can use the FY21 codes. Any contract that was awarded after FY22 should use the new codes. If there are any questions, we suggest that you get with the real property manager to make sure that we are utilizing the codes that they deem necessary. Once the funding source has been entered, you enter in the information for funding org and interest code. These have also been updated for FY22. The last step would be to use the additional information box if needed. So this now completes adding in information on a real property item. So if there are any questions, I open the floor up.
Can you describe who has access to make changes a little bit more in depth? What things specifically the COR may have to do to accept, or I see there's include DD there. Touch on that a little bit.
Once the contractor has completed entering all the information for the real property ID, the facility, the CAT code, the units, and the total cost, and has selected the submit for government approval, the COR would then come into this screen here, and it would at the upper right would check the box marked accepted. That would then lock that record for the contractor's edit. or delete. And from that time on, the COR would be controlling the information that would be entered in this screen.
Question in the chat is real property database. Who updates and maintains the data, and where does the data come from?
The data is maintained by the Department of Defense, and quarterly we go out and look and see if there's been any changes. Normally they only change it yearly, but we look every quarter, and if we notice there are any changes, we input those changes into the RMS database.
Michael, is that HQIS? Is that where you guys are pulling that data from? You know, you don't know. That's okay.
I don't know. I can't
okay.
remember the acronym off the top of my head.
It is HQIS.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I thought. That's good. That's the source material. That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, we got another question. The other question is, once the contractor enters the category code, does the standard primary UM and secondary UM automatically populate to reflect Army guidelines?
Yes. That's part of what we look at when we download the new information.
Looks like I also forgot another question. So I have an FY 2019 project with a 2019 funding source, Milcon, and the Air Force on base wants to change the funding source 0500 or FY22.
Not sure I understand the question.
I do not know the answer to that question either. We will take note and get back to you on that one.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. I wasn't aware that you could change the funding, that the funding source has changed based on the fiscal year of the project award. I guess the question is
you're not tied to that fiscal year award. You're not tied to that. We had to put in some sort of trigger to have the menus change. Since we were changing it for FY22, that's what we chose. You could use FY22 for an FY19 contract, no problem.
All right. And some of the other questions are these changes active currently? Yes, these should be out in production right now in 320. So for the example in the slide, category code 14182, so 14182, the UM code is AC acre, not persons or SF, question mark.
Oh, this was during testing when we created the slides. That has been updated, and I will double check that and get that out to everybody.
Okay, cool. Read the funding information. Are we able to enter custom information rather than select from the menu? Our Navy RPAO for interest code wants it to be FEE, which is not a selection in RMS.
Unfortunately, because these codes are governed at Department of Defense level, we cannot enter in anything other than what's in the dropdown. We can take the question and we can run it back through DoD, but I would suggest that the real property also run it through their chain as well.
Okay, another question we've got is for the contractor, are they able to export the PDF DD1354 to send to the government separately?
No. Creation of the 1354 resides only with the government, because in order to complete the 1354, there's a lot of information that only the government has access to.
Air Force's RPAO wants the FEE interest code as well.
Okay. FEE is one of the interest codes that is part of the FY22 release. I misspoke earlier. My apologies.
Any other questions? Okay, here we go. We got another question. Type of construction. How does that translate to the labels on the 1354? Referring to the box 8A, there are 4 options: acquisition, transfer, capital improvement, and inventory adjustment.
That would be depending on what type of 1354 you're trying to do, so it really wouldn't pertain to the type of construction.
All right, let me go on to the next question. He says, when you are adding property, is there any way to adjust the order of the line items, or will it only depend on the sequence that you are adding?
You're talking about when you're creating a 1354?
And it says yes, when you're creating a 1354.
When you create the 1354 and it brings in the real property item, it brings it in as in the order in which the real property items were created. So 1 becomes 1, 2 is 2. You can't change that around. The only way to change it would be when creating the real property items themselves.
Yeah, that actually happens sometimes, where you get to the end and you have 20 items and you're like, then the real property officer's like, number 14 should have been number 3. And we don't really have a way to move that.
So on 1354s, you can control the way the 1354 is done by the order you add them in. So if you add like item 1 from your list and then item 5, it will display item 1, 5, and such in that order as you add them into the 1354. I've done that before where they decide 20 should be 14, so I go back and I regenerate the 1354 and I just put them in the order when I add them that they want, and then it regenerates with them in that order. It doesn't actually correspond to the number of how you put them in. Over.
Awesome, thanks. Can we implement changes in the breakdown and category codes later on based on the feedback from the real property manager, such as corrections?
Yeah, if you do find something that is not, that the real property feels is not correct, yeah, please submit a help desk ticket and we'll look into it.
All right, box 8A is a pull-down menu. Sometimes we have some assets that are capital improvements and others that are acquisition within the same job. Is it possible to designate that per real property item versus for the entire 1354?
That would be a discussion that would have to go to DOD because it's the DOD's form and that's the way they have it laid out.
The funding source list and the fund list does not include the countries that are managed by the Middle East District. How do we get those sources added?
That would have to be run up through DOD because they maintain that list.
Database and the information, and you folks, I guess, upload and maintain that information. Do our contractors, like, I know I have a difficult time on trying to find Army real property codes or even Navy real property codes or even Air Force for that matter, like on Google. Is there a place or a location or resource that we can provide to our contractors to look up the information, like the real property codes? So I know Army used to have in 2006, they used to have this really thick book with full descriptions, and it talked about primary, secondary units of measure, and I still kind of refer to that. But is there something that we can point our contractors to so that when they are developing this, they have guidelines? Over.
Yeah, I used to refer to those DA pamphlets as well, and they haven't really kept those up to date, and I've never really been able to find a good one for the Air Force or the Navy. Unfortunately, the best source of information would be the real property master at your installation.
Okay. So I'm sorry. So I was told. So yeah, we did get a spreadsheet from our Army RPAO. However, they mentioned to us to not share that. I guess it's not shared public information, so we can't just send it out to our contractors. If not, it would be on the internet, right? I'm imagining.
Yeah.
So like, how do we?
That's why they haven't quite kept up with. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right. So if they don't have access to that, what I'm saying is, then how do we then, you know what I mean? It's sort of the government is then developing it for the contractor. I mean, because we get stuff like they're using overhead or underground electrical line category codes for, I don't know, everything that they think is related to that. So we have a 1354 with 5 assets and they all have the same category code. I mean, how do we give our contractors the best resources and tools for them to develop something to give us, you know, something good, right? Because garbage in, garbage out. How do we do that or direct them to do that? Over.
Why don't you send me an email with your question, and we'll look and see what we can find and see what we're allowed to send out. I know it's not a great answer right now, but I don't want to tell you to do something and then somebody finds out that we're releasing information that should not be released. So, but we'll work on trying to get something, and maybe there's a way we can put some more descriptions inside of RMS or some sort of other module or something somewhere. But we'll look into it. Okay.
Right. Okay. Perfect. And then I'm sorry. I did have a follow up. I think there was a discussion about, so Brendan's question about how do we, you know, sort or adjust line items. And I know it's been said that it'll show up under 1354 how we put it into RMS, but then I think there was a talk after that. So has that been corrected? Are we able to adjust lines and move them over?
We had to change the reporting subprogram that RMS uses to, it's called Telerik, and that puts it in numerical numbers. So the number that the order in which they were entered as real property is the order in which it's going to show up on the 1354. That is a change from what fast reports used to do, and we're going to look into going back to that and making it so that however the order is that you enter them on the real property form is how it's going to be displayed. But that will be a release coming out.
Okay. Wait, so I'm sorry. So you're saying how it's going to display on the report is how we put it, is the order that we put it into RMS. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, the order that
Because I
it's
think that's
displayed, the order that it will be displayed on the DD1354 is the order in which the real
Mhm.
property items were created. So real property item number 1 will be number 1, number 2 will be number 2, so on and so forth. What it used to do is, however you added them to the 1354, it was the order in which they would be displayed. That is what we've got to change back to.
Okay. So will there also be in this fix? Can we just even rearrange that? Because sometimes, okay, so I'm thinking now that the contractor has the ability to add in real property assets, is it going to show up now under 1354 how the contractor adds it or creates the real property assets?
The way it is programmed now, yes. However the contractor adds it in is how it's going to show up on the real property form, which is what we're going to try to change with the next
Okay. And then
release.
okay, so that will that change allow the government to just move it in any order that we want?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. What I
Thank
envision happening is the contractor will enter in the real property items in whatever order. When the government goes to create the 1354, you then pick which order you want them to be in, and that's the order that it will be displayed on the form.
Okay, and but is that like a one time? Like, can we just constantly pick? Because okay, so the problem or the issue is now is the government will do the 1354 in the best way, and believe me, RPOs are very different. Some of them want to see the building first, and then the sprinklers, and everything tied to the building, and then the outside items. But other RPOs, they want to see all the buildings together and then all the sprinkler systems for whatever reason, if you have multiple buildings together. So it's a constant we're changing. And so I always have to just delete the real property and then I have to redo it in the order that I need it to be in. So is this change going to allow us to constantly move these lines up and down in any order?
We will look into we'll look into the ability of dragging and dropping them around, but as it stands right now, you would have to delete and then re-add. But we will look into drag and drop ability.
Yeah, so this is Dallas program with the female. Yeah, so there's like right now how the system is set up is just how it is. You have to do what Bob was describing with deleting and adding things. If we do implement a change, usually we have a process for requesting those types of changes, and that's going through your RMS administrator, then through CCBI for it. But I'll look at this one specifically, talk with the team and see if it's something that we can do. But I want to make sure that we're staying within our normal lanes for enhancements and such. But I'll take a look at it. We'll see what we can do.
Okay. That would be greatly appreciated. Like that takes up most of my time. So what I normally have to do is I develop a spreadsheet before I even put it into RMS. So I create a spreadsheet and then I have to send that to the RPAO and I ask them if this is the order that they want it in. Because once I put it in there, then if not, I'm spending.
Yeah, I understand because you have to go back and do re-undo all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, especially if you have 40 line items. Yeah, it can be very consuming. So that would be that's one of the biggest things I would like to change.
Yeah, so I'd make sure that run it down your RMS admins, your POC out of your district, create a help desk ticket, sorry, a CCB item for it, and making sure that you get all the details that you want to have described in there of how you want to have you envision it to be, and then we can hopefully start pushing it through that way. Yeah.
Okay.
But I'll also since we're on this topic specifically, I'll also talk and look at it a little bit on the side as well, but still run down the normal path as we have set up for that.
Okay, thank
Just
you.
also wanted to mention too that during this transition to the new reporting engine, when you go to contractor reports, there's a button on the top right-hand corner that says legacy reports. You can run the fast reports for now, until we get Telerik the way till everyone's happy. So just FYI, if you needed to run fast reports, you can go to contract reports, hit legacy reports on the top right-hand corner, run the old fast reports one, and we have taken note. We'll run it by the PMO to get approval, and we'll get that working so that everyone's happy. Just FYI.
And this is Carrie. I just want to reiterate or clarify that right now our plan is to turn fast reports off by the 31st of December. We sent a notice out several months ago, as well as headquarters sent one out as well. And Telerik, it is replacing fast reports. Right now, I believe some of them are running concurrently. However, at the end of this calendar year, we plan to no longer have fast reports, but have Telerik. But again, if there are specific reports that exist, but you want to change something on them, like the order or things of that nature, just let us know. It may have to go through the CCB for approval. And there's a whole process for that. But every district or division, every core office, basically, there's a CCB lead. And if you need the link to find out who your CCB lead is, it's also on the RMS PMO SharePoint site. I can put the link to that in the chat. But you could check there and see who your lead is. And then, of course, you could always submit your request through them. But again, at the end of this calendar year, we plan to no longer have fast reports and to have only Telerik running, where all of the standard reports have been recreated, but the custom reports, of course, would have to be recreated by the person who created them to begin with, which would be the user. And there's training on how to do that. We conducted that earlier this year, and there's training on how to do that on the RMS website as well.
Okay, if there aren't any more questions, I think we can go ahead and complete this training for the day. My email is in the chat. If anything comes up after the meeting, please shoot me an email with your questions. As Carrie and Dow said, if there's any changes that you think need to be made, please work through your RMS administrator. And hope to see you on the next one. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you.